Good morning. My name is Ruth DiRoma, and I am one of the senior family educators here at INCLUDEnyc. And today we're going to be talking with Matt Puvogel from OEM. INCLUDEnyc is an organization that works with families that have children and youth with disabilities. Today's topic is emergency preparedness for people with disabilities. This is one of a series of live stream presentations that are aired on the third Thursday of each month at noon. We have a chat box. If there are questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to chat us up and we will try and get to the questions. So thank you. So, good morning, Matt.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Matt, and your background, your education, your job, your newest creation.
Sure. So I currently have a bachelor's in sociology from Delphi University, and I'm currently attending Delphi again in Manhattan for a master's in social work. So currently that's my education. I graduated in 2006 with a bachelor's, and I should be done with my master's in August, actually this August. So that's my current education as far as my background. So in 2007, I started working for the city. I worked for the mayor's office for disabilities until 2014. And then after that, I started working at New York City Emergency Management. And my original position at the office was an accessibility coordinator. So I dealt a lot with making sure the website for our office was accessible, documents on there for blind and low vision, and also worked with other staff in the office to make sure that our protocols were in place for accessible communications if we open shelters or service centers throughout the city. So that was mainly my job originally, and then from that position I transitioned to Ready New York, which is our main educational campaign for preparedness for emergencies. So within that role, I outreach to organizations that assist people with disabilities. And essentially, I travel to all different organizations. We do presentations and are also at community fairs. We usually are at the INCLUDEnyc fair in January. And there's many other organizations that we travel to, and we provide them information such as how to make a plan, how to gather supplies, be informed. And during those presentations, we add in many talking points about people with disabilities.
Wow. And your latest creation?
So I have a daughter who is 8 months, and her name is Colette. So she is very active, very loving, it's always fun to spend time with her. And yeah, she's 8 months. It's very active.
Wow.
And everyone always says she's so big, and it is crazy how big she's gotten in the past 8 months. And just to see all the different things that, as far as developmentally, how quickly they come about, it's really interesting.
Right. That's one of the topics that we have coming up very soon. So who's with you today, Matt? I see you have your service dog.
Yes, this is Jack. He's my guide dog. He's from the Guide Dog Foundation in Smithtown. And as far as some ground rules, if you do see someone with a service animal, I don't mention his name in public. I give him a fake name. There's a few other things too, like if someone asks if they can pet him, it's usually a no. Sometimes it's a yes if I really feel bad want someone to pet him.
Right.
If it's a little old lady and they say they want to pet him, I'm like, okay. But usually it's a no, not to pet him, and also definitely not to feed a dog that's working in harness. So those are some ground rules that, but especially his name, like I'm mentioning his name today, I usually don't do that in public. And it's for distraction purposes, and people with service animals, especially guide dogs, they're there to do a job, and it's, distractions, they do happen, they are dogs, but, it's something that you don't want to happen, especially if they're trying to guide you certain places.
Exactly.
So he's actually my third guide dog. I've had 2 other dogs. My first guide dog, in 2008, that was my first dog. Her name was Dolly. And then my second dog, Cliff, actually his name's Cliffy, but I call him Cliff. He retired about 1.5 years ago, so Jack's been working for close to 1.5 years, and he was kind of like the office mascot in the office. Everyone would play with them, but that was when he wasn't working. When he was working, he was a very good service animal.
Okay, so, what led you to OEM? The Office of Emergency Management.
So I actually worked, like I mentioned before, I worked at the mayor's office for disabilities. So when I worked at that office, we dealt with a lot of other city agencies, nonprofits, many other organizations, and I just found what emergency management, what they were doing, I found it interesting. Found it to be a new role that I could take on. Still working in the field of disabilities, especially with accessibility, with communications, and then also, after that, doing outreach to organizations that assist people with disabilities. So, I mean, from there, I actually, before I worked at emergency management, I attended meetings. We have an actual access and functional needs meeting usually every month. So I actually attended those meetings before working at the office. There was many meetings such like that. They might have had a different name, but they were similar to the meetings that we have today. So I would attend those meetings, and I got a sense of how the office was being run, and I thought it was really interesting to be able to still work with people with disabilities.
Thank you, Matt. So what do people with disabilities need to know first and foremost? And please talk about when to prepare.
So people with disabilities, the main thing I always tell people with disabilities is to take additional steps, have preparedness in advance. So that can include having a support network, and essentially that means having other loved ones, family, or friends that you can reach out to in case of an emergency. Obviously, if you don't have family or friends that are in the area, there's other ways that you can have a support network. Could be coworkers, could be maybe even reaching out to an organization that you receive services from, or if you have home attendants. So it depends on your network. Each person's network is different. Maybe people may have some family or friends in the area, some may not. And again, having a support network, even having the supports in other states, because if large emergency actually happen, communication obviously is key. So people can reach out to those other contacts and they can relay information. And it's especially important for people with disabilities because there's additional needs that will be included. So again, also like evacuating, so practicing evacuation routes. For myself, since I have a guide dog, people may not understand that a guide dog and their handler, it's a team. So if the dog does not know where to go and the person doesn't know where to go, it's not going to be that helpful, especially during an emergency. So for me, I always tell people with disabilities, and even including people who have service animals, to practice evacuation routes, know where you're going to meet at a meeting place with your loved ones, family, or friends, and also think about where there's an accessible meeting place where it's easy to get to if you have a disability. But service animals, they are not going to know a specific location if they've only traveled there once. I've been to INCLUDEnyc a couple times. Jack still does not really know where to go, and again, it's more, after time they'll know where to go, and especially getting there as quickly as possible. That's something that, for evacuating. And again, to go back, having a support network, having those friends and relatives that you can reach out to, again, people that you can trust. We always tell people to, as far as a backup for communication, if you can't communicate, if there's no way to meet at a meeting place, providing a copy of keys to family and friends, because that would be a backup as far as communication. And again, also like having medications written out, how often and when. And this is all planned in advance, because if it's during an actual emergency, you may forget information. So you may forget the medications that you're taking and how often. So it's good to sit down with the support network and actually write this plan out. Our office, we have the My Emergency Plan. It's a workbook.
I think it's quite amazing.
Yep. So it's a good workbook where
Incredible packet here.
Yeah, the topics that I'm talking about are in that booklet. So it's a way to write out a plan. Also goes into kind of how having a plan B and C, having those backup plans in case plan A doesn't work, and that goes for evacuating too, having other places that you can evacuate to. So that's important. Again, also having supplies too for people with disabilities. Some supplies may be added to a go bag, and I'll talk about that again in a little bit. But go bags would be supplies, and then again, this is planning everything in advance. Having the supplies where if someone is blind or low vision, having an extra cane or sunglasses. Those are things that would be included. And then also other things too. If someone is using, say, Life Alert or if other durable medical equipment, maybe writing down the serial numbers of those equipment, and also having extra batteries. So, like, Life Alert and other types of batteries may not be as easy to come by. So it's planning that in advance, maybe reaching out to the medical companies also.
Great. Wow, so you are filled with information, which
It's a
is
lot.
terrific.
It's a lot.
No,
Yeah.
but it all makes a lot of sense because we want to make sure we do this in advance, not the time of, or not when the forecasters start saying there's something coming up and there's little or no time to prepare.
Sure.
So who's the first people? I mean, the first people they should reach out to obviously are the support system.
Yeah, I would say family and friends first off, but again, if that's not a possibility, then having could be an organization they're receiving services from, home attendants. But again, usually family and friends, that's where we would tell people to evacuate to first, and obviously reach out to them. But then if that's not an option, then we do have shelters if there is a hurricane or coastal storm. So we have that as a backup plan. Usually for shelters, I always kind of joke that they're a lifeboat, not a cruise. So they're going to be there to
Exactly.
keep you safe, but they're not that comfortable. But that's a backup plan that we always tell people to think about. But plan A is really going to be contacting family and friends and anyone else you can trust. If it's someone that you're working with, that's your support. Again, each person's plan is a little bit different. It's personalized to them.
So is there one or two dedicated sources of information for people with disabilities?
So we have our website, nyc.gov/emergency management, and on our website we have a specific page on our website that talks about all the topics that I'm talking about today. So it talks about sheltering, transportation, communications, all the different things on our website. And in addition to that too, there is the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. They're another website that does have, they share our information during emergencies. But they also have other programs like ASL Direct. They talk about the accessible transportation options. So those are things that are included on the website. Our website has a lot of information about emergencies. The website that talks about sheltering and transportation and communications. Those are things that are in addition that someone should think about beforehand. Communications being that each person with a disability might communicate a little bit differently.
Right.
So people who are deaf or hard of hearing might use text messaging. People who are in public, they may have we also recommend like index cards to say, I speak American Sign Language. So little things like that can help with first responders, but also like transportation. We have a transportation assistance program through 311. So that's a thing that people can call 311, and if they need assistance with transportation during coastal storm time, that's a program that 311 would either route someone to an accessible evacuation center or to a hospital.
In your plan book, definitely there's huge maps and all sorts of information about the zones that people live in, so they can prepare best if they know that they will have to evacuate.
And on our website too, there is also the Hurricane Evacuation Zone Finder, which is accessible for blind, low vision, and it mentions all the accommodations that we do provide. So that's also another source. If people are not sure like where they need to evacuate to, they can call 311 and they can actually get that information. So they can call up and say, this is my address. And then from there, they'll be told what zone they live in and also the closest evacuation centers. On our website, it lists the accommodations that we provide. And also in that booklet, it has the icons for accessibility for the accessible locations.
Right. So for people who are living in an apartment building, are there any special things that they need to know? Tall buildings keep getting taller and taller and taller.
Yes. There is guidance through HPD and also the fire department. They provide guidance as far as buildings and evacuations. So there is that as through the city. There's also, as far as if you do have a disability, it's always good to speak to the building management and let them know that I do have a disability, and speaking with them to see like how the building can accommodate them, maybe speaking to the building management and seeing maybe even if someone, say if they're blind or low vision, showing on the exits, things like that, also providing information about the building in accessible formats. So these are things that individuals with disabilities should speak to the management, but also the city specifically encourages like building owners to check if they know that there are people with disabilities in the building, to try to check on them before and after emergencies.
Exactly. So what's the difference between 311 and 911 in an emergency?
So 311 is a city resource that we have. So for our office specifically, before emergencies and even during, we have messaging that if someone does not have access to a computer, so it's city services. So it may talk about our preparedness information that's here today. During an emergency, it would provide transportation assistance. So that messaging is through 311, so someone can call up, like I mentioned, and ask, okay, like what evacuation zone do I live in, and they can find that information out. And also for transportation too, they can, if they need that additional transportation assistance, they can get that information through 311. So it is city information, but also, there is information about emergencies that someone can obtain if they don't have access to a computer. And 911, again, it's emergency specific. So if someone feels if their life is in danger, they can call 911 if there's a fire. Even depending if someone lives in a fireproof building or non-fireproof building, they can still call 911. It's for any other emergency where someone feels their life is in danger.
Right. Okay. So stay or go. I guess that's the big question for many people, especially for people with disabilities who would prefer to stay in their homes. Who would you listen to? I know that there are CERT teams. Can you describe what a CERT team is?
Sure. So for emergencies, for staying or going, it's always good to listen to city officials, but again, it's the person's responsibility to if they feel their life's in danger, again, they would stay or go. But for some city officials, specifically for coastal storms, if there is a coastal storm, city officials would tell people, if you live in zones 1 or 2, and those are the evacuation zones, which there are 6 of them. So if someone was living in, say, zones 1 or 2, or the lower lying areas in the city, so that would include Lower Manhattan, Coney Island, Staten Island, or the Rockaways. Those are some examples. Those by the city officials saying, okay, you need to evacuate. That's something you'd want to listen. So you take safety, you go, shelter if you have to, or loved ones or family and friends. For staying specifically, that might be emergencies like winter weather, an active shooter or terrorist event. So again, it's important to listen to city officials. If it's not safe, to listen to them and not go out into the public.
Right. So the CERT, the community emergency response teams, do they go house to house? Do they know who may need help?
So CERT, community. So it stands for Community Emergency Response Teams. They usually will be involved if there is winter weather, or if, say, we open a shelter, they would help out with certain accommodations. We actually do training for CERT, how to interact with people with disabilities appropriately. So for emergencies like that, they would be active. That's part of what they do specifically, and they would help out in those times of emergency for them.
Okay. Let's talk about our service animals and our pets. Who do we call and what we do to make sure they're safe, and can we bring them with us?
So having a go bag, first off, everyone thinks have a go bag for your pets. Why would you want to do that? And it's because they're part of the family. So that's the first thing I would say, put a go bag together for your pet, and even service animal. So having the supplies, having extra water, having food for them, even a blanket, because I go to events, my service animals, sometimes they don't like to lay on the ground for a long time. It's kind of uncomfortable. So even having a blanket, so having those extra supplies. And for our office, we also have an animal planning task force. So if there are emergencies, we work with other agencies like the ASPCA, Red Cross, Animal Care and Control. So we work with those agencies. So if there is an emergency, they can assist. Say if there's animals stuck in a building, they can help out with that. So those are some additional agencies that we work with. For service animals and pets, if there is an emergency, we open, obviously the shelters, we have pet-friendly rooms for pets, but also for service animals, we're not going to separate the handler from the dog specifically, because that would cause great stress, and it's inappropriate to do that first off. So for the pets specifically, again, like I mentioned, back to the go bag, having the supplies, but we do have some supplies that would be in a shelter. Again, pets and service animals, if someone comes into a shelter, and they say, I have a therapy animal, we're not gonna ask for documentation because we want everyone to be safe during an emergency. So again, it's we're there for all New Yorkers, want to keep everyone safe. So that's some of the information as far as what we have for shelters, and it's people with disabilities and people who have pets, they can evacuate to the shelters. That was something that current concern with other emergencies, with other coastal storms, that people didn't feel safe or comfortable evacuating because they have pets. And that's one thing for many of the presentations I do throughout the city, that's a question. Even though we message it out, we provide information, it's one of the main questions we always get.
Real good. I saw the ASPCA truck, a couple of months ago, and they literally have bird cages in that truck.
They
which I
do, yeah,
thought
they have
was
an actual,
amazing.
they actually have a truck, yeah, we did a pets event in Union Square
Yes.
the beginning of September. So yeah, a lot of those agencies that we work with were at that event. And then in addition to that too, like the Guide Dog Foundation and also Cable and Canines for Independence. So trying to include the pet organizations, but also the service animal organizations to educate the public that those agencies are out there and they're trying to help people.
Okay. So medical supplies, are they going to be at the shelters? What kind of medical supplies? For some people, finding a low-lying cot may be really not appropriate for them. Are the shelters going to have different kinds of equipment and services?
So we have durable medical equipment. So we have a stockpile of equipment that we provide in shelters. So that can range from wheelchairs to walkers, canes, crutches, and also refrigerators for medication. So if someone were to come to a shelter and they needed to store their insulin, their diabetes, or say if it was psychotropic medications, they could store them in the refrigerators. So we have those accommodations for people with disabilities. In addition, we have other services too, and we do trainings throughout the city on how to work with people with disabilities appropriately. But those are some of the supplies that we have. We also provide video remote interpretation for people who use American Sign Language.
Great.
So in that it is we have a tablet at the location, so that's one way for communication. But again, if that were not to work, we have backups for actually requesting interpreters if that was needed. So we have that option, and also for people who are blind or vision, we have auditory orientation of the shelter, and also the information in Braille. So those are some additional things that we provide in that aspect. And also there's charging stations in the shelters too for electric wheelchairs and also communication devices.
Most of the shelters, from what I understand, are in schools. How many of them are technically up and running?
So throughout the city, Department of Education has shelters. They are located throughout the city. And the accommodations, like I mentioned, they run from wheelchairs to walkers, canes, and crutches, and refrigerators. But also in addition to that, too, there's signage throughout the shelters that say that the location is accessible, and the messaging is also has Braille on the signage. So we have that, and then again, the messaging for charging equipment. We have signage throughout the shelter that says that we give priority to people with disabilities. So, Department of Education, there are schools that we work with and work closely with the Department of Education to make sure that the locations are accessible and the services we're providing.
So, historically, not all schools were accessible, so hopefully now at least some of the retrofitting may help.
Yeah.
But you say that there is equipment now to
There is, yes.
provide for some of the things that people will need. That's good. All right. So, how do they get to the shelter? You're at home. Your house is flooding. How do they literally get to the shelter?
So this is planning, goes back to planning in advance. So in the My Emergency booklet, it talks about having obviously transportation routes in mind. For people with disabilities, it's gonna, there's obviously additional things that you have to think about. So think about how am I gonna get to the shelter? So if planning is not gonna work, especially for the transit system, for coastal storms, it shuts down 6 to 8 hours before hurricane, or coastal storm. So having that secondary planning transportation in mind, so having maybe Access-a-Ride or having the use of accessible wheelchair taxis. So trying to think, and if that doesn't work, then maybe having a backup, maybe have a family member that has a disability parking permit. I have a disability parking permit, they can maybe transport myself. So thinking that in advance, the city also has, like I mentioned before, there's a transportation assistance program. It's called the homebound evacuation operation.
Yes, talk.
So that's a program in place where an individual with a disability, if they have difficulty evacuating in coastal storm zones, they could call 311 and they would tell that they need assistance with evacuation. They have a disability, so the call taker will ask questions, and from what the representatives told, they'll either be routed to accessible transportation, accessori, or to emergency services. So either be to the evacuation centers that are accessible or to a hospital. So those are the two options. It's not going to be transportation to, say, someone's apartment or my relative. It's not. We're not going to do that, but it will be to those two options to keep the individual safe during an emergency. But that program is called the Homebound Evacuation Operation, HEO, is the initials.
Okay, and we can find that on all formats?
It's on our website, actually. The page that I talked about that talks about disabilities is on there as far as that we offer that program.
Because I know people who were afraid to leave because they just didn't know how they were going to get somewhere or how they get back was a secondary concern.
But yeah, it's either accessorized or we work with fire department or emergency services. So it depends on the person's accessibility, if they can get to the curb, if they can sit up, if they can get out of their apartment. So it's depending on their accessibility and their disability, how they travel.
Okay. All right. And Notify NYC. I got a high wind warning this morning. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Notify NYC is one of our main notification programs. So that's for individuals where we have that program, and then we have the advanced warning system for organizations that assist people with disabilities. So Notify NYC is a program that we offer throughout the city. It's a free program where you can sign up for up to 5 zip codes. And if you work in one place, you're going to an organization that provides services to you, you can have different zip codes providing information. And you can also opt in and out of certain messages. For myself, I don't need messaging about driving in a car. That's not me. I don't need that.
Mhm.
You don't want me driving. So yeah, I don't need that. So I don't have that messaging included. But for me, I take the train. I travel through Penn Station, so I want to know if my train is running or not. So it can tell me that. And even so, it goes from small emergencies like transportation is not running, or maybe there's a water main break, to larger emergencies like hurricane might hit the city, or there's a heat wave. So it can provide information, but it may also provide tips to help you prepare for emergencies. And the messaging is offered through text messages, through a voicemail, through landline, or email address. And also the messages, we have American Sign Language messages through Notify NYC, and also voiceover for people who are blind and low vision. So we offer that, and then also we have Notify NYC. We have an app through Apple and Android. Again, we worked with the Mayor's Office for Disabilities and do it to make sure it was accessible. So the options through that, you can actually sign up and it will track your location. If there's emergencies going on, it'll let you know about that.
Great. It's good to know.
And we also have Ready NYC, the materials that are here. We have an app for that too, which is accessible. And for someone who's blind or low vision or has disabilities, they can fill that out. They can include their plan and actually share it with family members.
Terrific. How do people get copies of the guide?
So they can request, if they would like information, they can go onto our website, nyc.gov/emergency management. They can request it through the website. They can also contact me. But mostly we have a request form on our website where they can get the materials. On our website too, we have the guides in PDF format that's accessible, and also in audio format. The guides specifically there are in 13 different languages, and also audio format. And then when we go to presentations or also fairs in the community, we also can provide information in Braille. We have tips for people who are blind, low vision, that is in Braille. It's not the full My Emergency Plan, but it gives tips for people who are blind, low vision about what they should be doing.
I would think everyone would want one of these because it organizes everything
It
in
does.
such wonderful ways with a lot of spaces that kind of tell you what your next step is.
Yeah. And it's good that we have the app, but again, if phones are not working, let's say if someone's phone is not working, this is like a really good backup plan, having all the information in one place, having a copy of certain tips in your go bag, having all that information, it's really key to have.
Okay, so we know how to reach you, we know how to get the information, and you have provided us with amazing amounts of detail. So we are in great shape. Let's hope we don't have one of these emergencies, and other than some wind and rain. But thank you, Matt. Thank you for being here and for helping us understand how people with disabilities can stay safe. So please join Include for some of our upcoming events, such as College is Possible on Tuesday, October 29th, or our next live stream on Thursday, November 21st, A Parent's Introduction to the Sensory System, hosted by Panapoto with Melissa Callahan, the Chief Clinical Officer of Brainstorm Kids Solutions. You can find this live stream and other workshops and events on our Include NYC.org calendar, and there's many live streams and podcasts on the website. So please join us at lunch or while traveling, and thank you all for listening in today.